okay? Good, good, good. Anybody get a Sunday afternoon nap? Anybody? Anybody? A couple? Praise God. Man, there is nothing like a nap. Okay, so here is the deal. My name is Tyler, and I am the student pastor here, and tonight is going to be a really, really great night. This is one of those parenting events where we actually, our student ministry and our kids ministry are combining forces to talk about something, to talk about the pornography tonight. And so Greg right here, Summers, is our kids pastor, and so he and I have been working on this, and so we really hope, our biggest prayer is that this would actually be helpful. The other thing that I will say is we may not be able to get to all of your very specific questions that you have from the stage or in our panel discussion, but we, just because we walk off the stage and the event is over, it doesn't mean that the conversation has stopped. And so we were just going to let you know we will be up here as long as you guys need to talk. We can give you guys our cell phone numbers, emails, or whatever to continue these conversations that we're going to start. But I just wanted to say I am so thankful that you guys are here, because what that means is that you are actually living into the responsibility that God has given you as a parent. I mean, because the reality is, and you understand this because you're here, but God has uniquely positioned the family, and he's uniquely positioned you as a parent with specific responsibilities. Like, you understand, you're supposed to raise your kid, and take care of them physically and emotionally, but because you're here, it shows us that you actually care about where your kid is spiritually. And so when God designed the family, he actually gave parents the responsibility as the spiritual leader of their home. Now, spiritual leadership may seem like a big and heavy term where you think, man, I don't know enough about the Bible, or I don't know enough about theology or whatever, but I just want you to understand just the fact that you are here is a step in the right direction to help lead and disciple your kids well. And so that's where we're going to be going tonight, is as we talk about pornography. And if you didn't know that we were talking about pornography, welcome, settle in. We're really we're eager to get into this conversation because of how much it has impacted a lot of people. And so thank you for being here. And so basically the question that we're going to be wrestling with tonight is this: How do we best parent our kid or student when it comes to pornography? How do we best parent our kid or student when it comes to pornography? Now, these conversations can be incredibly difficult. They can be awkward, and they, in some cases, actually can be heartbreaking when you begin these conversations with your kid or student. But what we see sometimes are parents that are just saying, man, I'm hoping that everything's going to work out for my kid. Like they just, when it comes to this, they're like, oh, I just hope that everything's going to work out when it comes to sex and sexuality and pornography and sexual content. I just hope that everything just works out okay. But here's the thing, we don't have a problem telling our kids that, hey, you need to clean your room, because we know that develops some sort of responsibility in them, right? And we don't mind telling our kids that they can't talk to us disrespectfully, right? Or be disobedient towards us. But for whatever reason, when it comes to this, and I think it's because maybe it's a scary and heavy topic, we just back away. Sometimes we back away and we just okay, I just hope that they figure it out. As long as they don't get in trouble or hurt somebody or get somebody pregnant or whatever, as long as that's fine, then we're going to be okay. But our hope for tonight is that you don't have to just hope. You understand what I'm saying? We hope that our hope for tonight, our prayer for tonight, is that you don't walk away just saying, well, I hope that my kid turns out okay. We're going to try to give you the very best content that we can. We're going to equip you as best we can. We'll stay here as long as we need to answer any question that you have. But we don't want you to just hope. We want to equip you to have these conversations well. So tonight is going to be broken down into 3 major sections, just so that you guys know kind of where we're going, where we're at in the night. The first section, I'm going to be talking about guarding the heart. And so I'm going to continue in that in just a second. But then we're going to open up some conversation. And so we're going to ask you guys to talk maybe with a spouse or maybe somebody you came with or somebody that's close to you, sitting close to you, because we want this to be kind of like a learning but also a lab. Do you know what I'm saying? And so if you've never had a conversation about pornography, the first conversation you have about pornography doesn't need to be with your kid. It needs to be maybe in a safe environment like this, where you're able to maybe fumble over some words. And so we want to give you that space tonight. So just put that out there. So I'm going to get up here. We're going to talk. We're going to have some conversation. And then Greg, our kids pastor, is going to come up, give you guys some practical advice on guarding the eyes. And then we're going to have some more conversation. And then Greg and I are very excited. We actually have 3 parents that have been in this. They've either graduated kids right in the age that you have kids in, or talk about personal struggles. They're going to get up here, and we're going to ask them a couple of questions, and then we're going to have some conversation out of that. So it'll be a panel discussion, and then we will close out the night. Sound good? Good. So when it comes to guarding the heart, is what we're going to talk about first. When it comes to guarding the heart, we actually need to kind of maybe even back away and look at this question again and say, how do we best parent our kid or student when it comes to pornography? We need to maybe define what we're talking about when we talk about pornography. Because for what it is worth, we may not know necessarily, we may not agree all on what pornography is. I mean, it isn't, some would say, oh, this over here, this is pornography, but this isn't pornography. It's not as black and white as we want to make it. It's a little bit more gray. Some would say 50 Shades of Gray. But the thing about it is that we have to understand that we maybe all agree that like you go to a porn website. You guys are still laughing at that joke. It's Slate. I told you it would. All right, so we could all agree that if we go to a porn website, and we could look at that, and we're not going to do that, but we could look at that and say, oh, that is pornography. Like, we could say that. But what about when it comes to like Twitter? Twitter has pages that are designated to like pornography videos and pictures. And we're like, okay, that makes sense, yes. But what about when it comes to Instagram, and there are pages dedicated to girls in bikinis or guys with few, like, little bit of clothes on? Is that pornography, right? Or what about when your kid is in an art history class, and they're flipping through their book, and there are nude paintings of women or men? Is that pornography? Or what about when we go to a YouTube channel, and it's like, this is a designed YouTube channel that people go and interview people on the street about their sex life? Now, there is a wide range there. There is some that's like, oh, yeah, that's for sure pornography, but there's something else that's going on. Those things that it isn't necessarily naked people having sex with one another, doing sexual things. Like, that's not pornography, but I don't necessarily want my kid looking at that either, right? And so when we say this question, we kind of want to expand our idea of pornography for tonight to sexual content. Whether it is naked pictures of people, whether it is people having sex, or whatever it may be, or just interviews about sexual content, we are just going to kind of broaden our scope to that. Because now, when it comes to that, our tendency is to say, how many restrictions can we put around our kid? Like when it comes to, as conversations I have had with some parents and maybe even some of you, it's like, what do I need to do to put up as many boundaries so they can't get to it? Here's the thing. We're not going to be able to put enough boundaries up to protect our kids' eyes from everything. And so, and the other thing about it is that if our first reaction is, how do we restrict? How do we put up boundaries? How do we guard them? How do we like isolate them so that they will never see some sort of sexual content? We're actually just like helping them do what Dallas Willard calls sin management. Dallas Willard has this idea. He processes this idea where he says that we have lifted the Christian life to a place where we think, hey, how can we just deal with sin? Like, what is it that we need to do with just like sin? And so what we think is that, hey, if I can take sin and I can manage it here and put it in this box, it's not good. I know it's bad. I know Jesus died for it. But if I can just manage it, then that's good. And then the rest of my life is okay. But what happens is, especially when it comes to sexual content, if we are just trying to get our kids to sin manage that, at the very best, we are training our kids to be legalistic Pharisees, to say, hey, you do this right, do this right, do this right. And then when they fail, they're going to feel even more guilt and shame. So that's the very best. At the very worst, they walk away from church because they think God is just a bunch of boundaries, Captain No Fun, that doesn't want them to have any sort of enjoyment or joy in life. Now, hear me say this. There is undoubtedly space for boundaries, restrictions, and Greg is going to give us very specific details on that. For us, though, it just can't be the place that we start. We can't start with restrictions and boundaries and protecting their eyes. We actually have to go to something else. We have to go to their heart first. And so that's why I'm talking about guarding the heart first. And in fact, this is actually what Jesus did when Jesus talked about the sexualized culture that he was in. When he was talking about adultery and lust, he started with the heart first. He didn't go to restrictions. So this is what he says in Matthew chapter 5. He says, "You have heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his" what? Heart. But then he says this, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body gets thrown into hell." See, Jesus does get to restrictions. Like we've got to gouge eyes out and cut hands off. Like that's what he's talking about, right? Not really, but what he's saying, he's using hyperbolic speech to say it is so important. Like he is saying we have to guard ourselves. We have to put up restrictions. So he's using this hyperbolic language of tearing eyes out and cutting hands off, and in other places cutting feet off, so that we could keep ourselves from sinning. But he doesn't start there. He starts with what's going on in the heart. And so we're going to start with the heart, because the reality is this: pornography isn't the issue. Sexual content is not the issue. It is an issue, and we're going to address it. But what is actually going on starts in the heart. And so looking back at this passage, it says that if a man looks at a woman, or a woman looks at a man with lustful intent. It's a really interesting phrase in the ESV, and it really captures what he's saying. And I think maybe even we can say, oh yeah, I know what that means. That's kind of clear. But I want us to dive a little bit deeper into this, because I think it's going to pull out some conversations that we can have as it relates to the heart. And so Bible scholar, a guy named Tim Mackey, brilliant guy, kind of phrases it or translates this passage this way. He says, lustful intent would say, anyone who stares at someone in order to fuel sexual desire for them. Anyone who stares at someone in order to fuel some sort of sexual desire for them. In other words, are our students and kids using images and videos to fuel some sort of sexual desire in them? Are our kids and students, are they using the videos or images, whether it be on a porn website, whether it be in an art book, whether it be them watching an interview about somebody's sex life, are they using that sexual content to fuel some sort of sexual desire in them? We have to get to the heart of that. You kind of see how we're drilling down on it just a little bit more, because what is happening here, Jesus actually, his teaching here is undergirded by his understanding of the way that God designed sexual desire. He's looking at what God has been designed it to be, because the reality is this, I just got a question. Is sexual desire good or bad? It depends, right? It depends. And so here is maybe a conversation to help you. We're going to kind of turn now to maybe some practical ways for you to get into the heart of your kids. So here, maybe this would work for a fourth grader, or maybe even depending upon, it could be up to a 12th grader. Here's a conversation that you can have about sexual desire. Say you can get a candle And you can look at it and you say, talking to your kid, you say, hey, look, like the candle, there's a fire, like there's a flame that's burning the candle, right? The fire in that context is good, right? Yes. I mean, it creates some sort of ambiance in the room. It creates a good smell or whatever it may be. Or you can do this. Hey, you see, you're at a fire pit, you're camping. Hey, the fire pit. Look, the fire is within its context. It's a good thing. But then you say, okay, well, what if that fire was like on a house? Or what if that fire was at the front of a car because the engine blew up? Or on a forest? Is fire good then? No. The same thing, it goes with sexual desire. God designed sexual desire to be good, enjoyable, and great within the context of what he created it for. Anything outside of that is in the same way, if you put fire on a tree in the middle of a forest, that is not good. When we take our sexual desire and point it towards something else, it is no longer good. That's an illustration that you can begin to do to get to the heart of your kid. It illustrates this idea that sexual desire is actually a good thing. We don't need to teach that it is a bad thing. It just depends on where it is directed. You guys see what I'm saying? And so when it also comes to that, we have to ask the question, okay, well, then what is God's design? Here's another conversation that you can have. When we say, okay, sexual desire is good within this context, within God's design, then we have to say, okay, well, what is God's design? And to do that, we have to go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, which says this: God created man in his own image, and in the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. So this is God's design for sex and sexuality and sexual desire. And there's two things. There's a lot that goes into this passage, especially as it relates to the image of God. But there is a lot that goes into this, but I want to pull out two things. The first thing is actually the second part of it. It says, be fruitful and multiply. He's talking to a husband and wife. I created them, male and female. And so we can be fruitful and multiply. There is a good design to God's, to sexual desire that God created. And here at Fellowship, we would say that design is between a man and a woman in a covenant relationship. That is where sexual desire is at its best. That is the flame on the candle. That is the fire in the fire pit. And so with that in mind, what you can begin to do, even to get to the heart of your kid, is this isn't necessarily a conversation, but you get to bring this as an example. To say, hey, we are mom, dad, we are like in a marriage relationship. We are connected to one another. We are in a covenant relationship. We are not leaving one another. And so throughout your life, as your kids grow up, you are showing them how to be married, and you are pointing them, you're casting a vision for them for the way that God designed it. And you are pointing them towards their future marriage and their future sexual intimacy. And that is a good thing. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, which actually is the first thing, is that it says is that everyone is made in God's image. God, he says it twice. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. 2 times it says that God created us humans in his image. And so what you can tell your kids when you get to the heart of this is that regardless of what a person looks like, smells like, what kind of car they drive, how much money they have, regardless of what they've done, what they failed to do, they were made in the image of God. Whether that person believes it or not, they were made in the image of God. Now, God, what that means is that God has uniquely positioned humans. He loves us. He wants to be in relationship with us. He's given us the capacity to have that relationship with him. He is our Father in heaven, and we are his children. We are his people. So once you've had that conversation, then you can say this. When we look at pornography, we are degrading the humans on the screen in that picture or in that video. We are degrading the image of God in them so that they can just be our own little plaything. when we are viewing pornography or when we're fueling sexual desire for our own selves, we are degrading their humanity. We are lowering their status in our eyes so they can just be an object for us. Now, I was having a conversation with my mom last night about my little brother, and she said, yeah, your little brother, he just hated to go to school. He hated kindergarten. He would tell me every morning, Mom, don't make me go to school. Don't make me go to school. Don't make me go to school. And she said, eventually, she's like, JP, why don't you want to go to school? And she said, because people just call me dumb all day. They just make fun of me, and I don't want to be there. How do you think God feels when we degrade his kids? How do you feel when somebody makes fun of your kid or degrades your kid? I'm even thinking about it now for my son, and I'm mad. I'm so mad right now, right? I think it's okay to say that God gets upset with us. He gets angry with us when we use other people for our own end. You can to get to the heart of this, take your kids to this passage and say, how do you think God reacts to you lowering the status of one of his kids? Maybe if you, for younger kids or maybe even middle teenagers, something like that, you can take an inanimate object, okay? Say, hey, they love their phone, all right? You can say, okay, what would happen? How would you feel if I just took a hammer to this phone and threw it away? This is something that they love, and so they can begin to understand, that would make me really mad. Well, God feels the same way about humans that you're degrading on the screen, lowering their status. Some people I know talk about animals. If your kid really loves animals, to say what would happen, it gets kind of weird, but like if we threw this puppy out of the car and it's like, oh no, we don't do that. Well, that's degrading that value in the same way you degrade the value of a human when you're looking at porn. You can do the same thing for little sisters or big sisters or whatever it may be, but put some context around that so that you can begin to have those few conversations about God's design, God's created image, degrading other humans when they look at porn, and that is going to zero in on the heart of your kid. That is going to zero down on the heart of your kid. Now, it may feel like, okay, that's great, conversations are good, and they are vitally important. Let me just say this. This is not a one-time conversation that you have with your kid. This is an ongoing conversation that you need to have. We would love for you to be the person that your kid goes to with these types of questions. That would be amazing, but it isn't just going to happen. You need to invite those conversations. You need to start those conversations. Some of them will be organic, some of them will be planned, but you can get to the heart of it. And you may think, but does that really change anything? Does that really do anything? And I would say absolutely. Because Greg's going to talk about this. They can get around the barriers. They can get around the filters, and eventually they're going to be 18 and they're going to be on their own. They may even pay for their phone. And so we have to learn how to help them get to the heart of the issue before we get to just the boundaries, okay? So that is guarding the heart. So I want you guys, there's two questions that we're going to put on the screen. There we go. And so we're going to take about 5 or so minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Greg will come up here in just a few and talk about this. But what does your approach need to be to get to the inner heart struggle of lust for your kid? And so what I mean by this is how is your kid wired? How is your kid wired? So there's some kids that you just need to shoot them straight. You need to sit them down and just like, hey, this is what the Bible says about this, and that's what they need. Some need to, hey, we're going to go get some ice cream. All right, then we're going to go to the park. And then you just kind of woo them into that conversation. But you know your kid better than anybody else. And so I would love for you guys to talk with people around you about what do you think your approach needs to be. And then based on those last conversation starters about sexual desire or degrading the image of God in somebody, what kind of conversations do you need to start or continue? All right, and so we're going to give you guys a few minutes to discuss amongst yourself, and then we'll be back up in a second.
So I know y'all have some good conversations rolling. I know it doesn't feel like very much time, but we want to honor your time this evening. So, and y'all have a good group over there. I like that. That's solid. It's like a new D group. I'll tell Tyler. He can count it. Well, first off, I just want to say it's a huge honor to be up here tonight. If we have not met, I am Greg Summers. I'm the kids pastor here at Fellowship Bible Church in Cabot. And like I said, I'm just really excited to be here tonight talking about this issue because it's such, like it's one of those things whenever I was a youth pastor, it made sense to talk about. Then I got into kids ministry, and all of a sudden I started hearing it creep up into our kids ministry conversations. And it's like, why is this creeping up now? We're in kids ministry, not youth. This is like a youth ministry problem. The student pastor knows all this stuff, not us. Why are we talking about this? And it's because this issue keeps getting younger and younger and younger. And so I'm excited to talk about it because I know there's some people here who have kids in that younger age group, that 4th, 5th, 6th age group. And it's so important. And, I just am honored to be here. But I want to say this first. The next 8 to 10 minutes will be useless if we do not put into practice what Tyler just talked about. We're going to talk about some practical things. We're going to get into some details. But all of it is for naught if we do not care about the heart of our kids and students. Because kids and students and people they know will find a way around everything we're going to talk about, all the filters, all the blocks, everything else we can do to regulate content. They will find a way around it if their heart is not right. I know Tyler said that, but we just want to keep reiterating that. I would say if you took one thing tonight, take that. Take that, because if we don't get that right, nothing else matters tonight. So as we talk about protecting the eyes, we need to start with this thought. We need to start with the end in mind. What do we want for our kids? What do we want for our kids when they grow up? We have kids now, we have students now, but our goal is not that they be kids and students forever, right? We want them to grow up, leave our house, stop eating our food, go on, be adults, right? So we need to start with the end in mind, because everything we do is going to be pointing them in a direction. Where we are now should not be where we are when they're older, when they're seniors. If we have a 4th grader, if we have the same restrictions, the same content blockers, all that, when they're seniors, we might have a problem, right? We need to start with the end in mind. So the end in mind is we want our kids to be adults who love God and honor Him with their lives. We want them to be adults who have healthy boundaries and practices when it comes to technology and content. That's our goal, is that when our kids launch out into college, that they have healthy boundaries and practices to have a healthy life around technology and content. But here's an issue for us. It's the underlying issue for all this practical stuff, is you and I are digital immigrants, and our kids are digital natives. We grew up with advancing technology. They've grown up with advanced technology. Whenever I was a kid, I was dying of dysentery playing Oregon Trail, trying to cross the river. You know what I'm talking about? You get one floppy drive, put it in, play. Get the other one, put it in, play, right? That's that was my childhood. I had to take a computer class to learn how to type in high school. My 4-year-old can unlock and navigate an iPad without any help. 4. That's scary to me. That I'm a digital immigrant, he's a digital native. And while we can't keep up 100% with all the advances of technology and social media, we have to do our best to at least have a grasp on a few things, because we need to know the world that they're living in and the world that we're living in, whether we know it or not. So we're going to talk about 3 different things tonight in this section. We're going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about filters and blockers, and we're going to talk about a little bit about actual features on iPhones, iPads, all those fun things. I want to say this, though, too. We want to be respectful of time tonight, so we're not going to do a deep dive in every, nitty-gritty detail on all this, but be looking for more resources. This is not the only conversation about this that we want to have. The goal of tonight is to get conversations started. So we want to continue to resource you as parents. We'll be putting out more content, more emails, hopefully having one-on-one coffee chats about how we're navigating this topic as parents. ourselves. So, let's dive in. Social media. The best way to start talking about social media is just to figure out, what do we mean when we say social media? Well, there's the obvious ones like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat. But then there's some that we might not think of as social media, but they are, and that's like YouTube, and social media, Pinterest. Oh, we're going to talk about Pinterest because it's not just pie recipes and fall decor. Things like Tumblr, just websites where people upload pictures. There's all these different platforms. And here's the deal, is not every social media platform is an equal opportunity offender when it comes to pornography and access to pornography. So I mentioned Pinterest. I know most of us use Pinterest to either get cool ideas for fall decor or Halloween decorations or that DIY project that we want our husband to do or our wife to do. We use it as this way to gather ideas. But even Pinterest, you're one search away from a rabbit hole that's really hard to get out of. And here's what's scary about social media is it's all so interconnected. It's like a giant web where you can go from Facebook to Instagram to Twitter to Snapchat in the blink of an eye. A few clicks, a few searches, you can just find yourself moving from one thing to another. And like I said, not all platforms are the same in how we gather and have access to content. So I want to talk about three, and I know there's some parents who are going to be like, well, you didn't mention this one or this one. I know. But these three, I think, are important because they are used so much. And the first one is kind of probably going to shock you a bit because we're talking about teenagers, but it's Twitter. Twitter is absolutely terrifying when it comes to pornography because it's such a mainstream platform, right? Our president, you can't go a day without hearing about some tweet he put out or like a response. I mean, like literally you can go from an article on Fox News to Twitter in a click. And here's what's scary about Twitter is you do not have to leave Twitter to find unabridged content that is graphic pornography. We're not talking about someone in a swimsuit, with like very little clothes on. We're talking about hardcore pornography on Twitter without leaving the website. One click away. You go to a news article, you click Twitter. If your kid is so inclined, if their heart is not right, they go to search something, they're one search away from finding anything on Twitter. Then we talk about Instagram. Everyone is on Instagram. If you're not, you should be because your kids are. And Instagram is scary to me for a whole other reason. It's because of what I call socially acceptable pornography. It's what Tyler talked about. It's how do we define pornography? Because our culture would say, if a woman wants to take pictures of her body and post it on Instagram to get followers, that's not pornography. That's just art. That's just how people make money nowadays. That's just that. But Instagram is so pervasive with that kind of content. It's everywhere. There are whole accounts based on just finding pictures of people that get you aroused. That's the whole reason they exist. When we think about pornography, like we were just talking, whenever I was a kid, pornography was a subculture. Probably whenever you were a kid, it was a subculture. No one talked about it. If you looked at it, you didn't broadcast it for everyone to know. But now there are porn actresses and actors who have Instagram accounts with millions of followers. Millions. And they have one reason to have that account, to drive more and more people to view pornographic content. And with Instagram, you have that socially acceptable version of pornography, but you're also a few clicks away from finding other pornography, what we would really call pornography, the stuff that is hardcore and graphic. I mean, there's a little link that you can put in your bio. If you didn't know, if you go to someone's account, there's a little picture of them, everything like, I love coffee and surfing and Jesus. And sometimes you'll see this link, tap my bio, link tree, about me. You click that, and it'll take you to a landing page with 5, 6, 7 different buttons. You can choose like, hey, find my Facebook here, find my sponsored content here, find my Twitter here, one click away. Or find my personal pornographic website. Here, one click away. So that's what's happening on Instagram, on Twitter and Instagram. And the last one is TikTok. It's probably one of the most widely used platforms with the emerging generation. I don't know a ton about it. I've never had TikTok. This doesn't dance. I don't do those kind of challenges. No one needs to see that. I keep that in my house. So, but it is, but like I'm sure if you have a teen, you know all about TikTok. There's the different dances that you can recreate. There's the challenges you can do. And the problem is that a lot of those are geared to be over-sexualized and inappropriate. But it's so socially acceptable, right? I mean, everyone's using TikTok, everyone's on it. So how do we navigate those things? So I would say with social media, one thing that we definitely need to be aware of is that if you have an account on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, somehow link your account, your kid's account with your account. If you have an Instagram, you can actually link your kid's account with your account where anything that they search, look for, any activity, you can just be one click away to see that. Or a great thing with social media is to have a family charging station where at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., whatever you choose, all the phones go in the basket and everything is open for mom and dad to look at. Now, I know we were just having a conversation earlier about Snapchat. There are ways around this as well. There are ways to delete search history, to delete content. So again, this is where we're going to have more conversations and more resources coming. But social media is a great place to start this conversation about how do we actually navigate technology, because it shows the need for things like blockers and filters. Now, we said it probably 1,000 times, going to say it again. None of this matters if we don't guard the heart. So I want to go back to that passage in Matthew 5, 29 through 30, because what we're going to talk about is going to sound kind of intrusive. It's going to sound kind of like an invasion of privacy, but look at what Jesus said. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out, throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to be thrown in hell. So we're about to move into this conversation about filters and blockers. And some of this is going to feel like, is it really that necessary to go that extreme? Jesus would say yes. He's talking about plucking out eyes and cutting off hands. What does it mean to block content? Does it feel extreme in our current culture? Yeah, because not that many people do it. But we're called to be holy, set apart as parents and families. So, talk about social media. It really highlights the reason why this is such an issue. Now let's move into filters and blockers. Again, we want to start with the end in mind. We want those kids, our kids to grow into those healthy adults who have healthy practices and boundaries around technology and content. Now, I know there's some parents here who have that younger age, 4th, 5th, 6th. Some parents here who probably have that like middle teenage year. You might even have students who are about to graduate soon. So how do we navigate this as a family? Do we need to have the same practices with the 4th grader that we do with the 12th grader? Well, here's what we would encourage you to do, is to set up a system that moves from, when they're younger, more restrictions, less freedom, to a system when they're older with fewer restrictions, more freedom, but also more accountability. And as I was listening to Tyler talk and I was thinking about my notes, these words came to my mind, and it's our whole vision and mission in kids is to know, grow, and show. We want kids to know, grow, and show in their faith. And it seems to fit this so well that we would have a season where we have more restrictions and we get to know our kids more, and our kids get to know our expectations, the expectations of God more. And then we have a season where they get to grow in their responsibility. They get to grow in their freedoms. And then they have a season where they actually get to go and show it. They get to go as young adults going into college or into life and show the tools and resources that they have as they live their life as an independent adult. So what does that mean? So in that first section of this, that no section, whenever they're at 4th, 5th, 6th grade, this is the season of life where we should restrict as much as we feel is necessary. Like I said, it might feel intrusive, it might feel extreme, But Jesus said to cut off hands and pluck out eyes. So when it comes to blocking content, it's not that extreme. So how do we do this? How can we actually block content? Well, there's ways on this device itself. You can go to screen time, and you can actually you can limit the access they have to certain content, certain websites, how much time they can spend on certain apps. So if you're worried that they're going to spend 3 hours and deep dive on Instagram or TikTok, you can set limits on those things. But probably one of the best full-on blocks that we can talk about is what they call a DNS reroute. Now, if you're a tech guy, you might know more what that means than I do. I just learned about this recently, but a DNS reroute is a service offered by companies like, what is one we have? OpenDNS, where if you did not know, here's how you get internet from your house. You have a router that sends a signal to a server, then sends it to the internet and comes back. A DNS reroute is simply this. Your router does not send a signal to a normal server. It sends it to a server in a company that then sends it to the internet, and as it comes back, it filters the content. So here's why this is important. Say you have locked down everything, every device in your house. Every computer has covenant eyes, has all the restrictions. No one can use any piece of equipment in your house to do anything nefarious. But then you have a sleepover, or a friend comes over from just down the road who has their own phone. Maybe their parents don't have stuff quite as locked down as you do. With a DNS reroute, anyone who uses your internet will have content blocked, whether their phone is set up for that or not. Now, our family pastor, Adam Sauer, he actually has a DNS reroute. He uses it with his kids, and he loves it. He hates it, and he loves it. It makes it kind of annoying because it blocks all the content coming in. And as an adult, we have more freedom, but he has young boys. So they've set this up in their own home as a way to restrict content. Because this is a season where we want more restrictions and less responsibility, because then that gives us more time to get to the heart of the issue. If they have less access, how are they going to spend more time on their phones or on apps? Although they're not, we're going to restrict how much time you have and what content you have. And we're going to set up our life as a family to get to know each other, to get to know our expectations of content and technology, and to get to know God on a deeper level. So that when, I need to back up and say this. This is also a great time to start using covenant eyes. Now, this is something that I encourage you to use for the rest of their life, but this is a great time to start using covenant eyes because it allows you to block and restrict the content that comes in through their own search engine. So covenant eyes, so get that DNS reroute, but also start using covenant eyes in this early season of more restrictions, so that when you move into that second section, that grow section, when we want to see our kids grow in their responsibility and we want to see them grow in their freedoms, we want to see them grow in their accountability. And how do we do that? Well, Covenant Eyes is a great tool for that, because Covenant Eyes is not just a blocker that you set up and just leave. It is something with built-in accountability. I was telling someone tonight, I had the honor of being someone's accountability partner on Covenant Eyes. And it was a really eye-opening experience, where all of a sudden I started getting emails with all of his history from his computer. He was a freshman in college, so he was doing a lot of searching for a lot of things. And my email just kept getting flooded with all of his search stuff. And this is a beautiful tool because it sets up something that can be such a great lifelong idea for them, is that accountability is a good thing. Accountability is not restrictive. It's not intrusive. It's a good thing. All of us need accountability, especially when it comes to topics like this, because we all know if that there are things in life, sins in life, where if you fall into it, it's not safe to talk about. It's really hard to talk about. But if we can build an accountability when they're young, it makes it a lifelong practice. So as you start to loosen those restrictions and to give them more freedom, lean on things like a Covenant Eyes account so that they can learn to start building that accountability with people in their lives. And we want to do this again with the heart and mind that when they leave our house, that they have these practices set up. It's nothing new. It's like we want to pray as a family. We want to read our Bible as a family. Well, you know what, I'm like, we want to have healthy relationship with content and technology as a family as well, and have accountability around those things. So lastly, let's talk a little bit about some features on screen time. Who here has an Apple phone, an iPhone, an Apple device? Android people, I'm sorry. I'm an Apple guy. Most of us are Apple people. But again, we will have more resources coming out about different platforms. But if you have an iPhone, screen time is a great feature. There's a lot of things you can do with screen time. They just updated it. So here's just a few. Downtime. You can actually schedule naps for screen time. You can say, hey, we're going to take a short break from screen time as a family. In 5 minutes, it starts using downtime. App limits. You can limit what apps are available at a certain time of day. I need this at work. Just shut Facebook and Instagram off at work, right? You can actually limit what they have access to. So if you're worried about, hey, I'm not taking my kid's phone at night, but I want to make sure that they don't have access to certain stuff, you can limit that access. You can limit who they can talk to or text. There's a communication limit on their as well. And then lastly, the one that I talked about earlier, content and privacy settings. You can block inappropriate content, purchases, and downloads of apps. These tools have a lot of stuff built in them. We just got to learn how to use it better, because it's all about starting with the end in mind so that we see our kids grow into healthy adults who have healthy practices and relationship with technology and content. So like we did earlier, we're going to take just a few minutes. And I got 3 questions on the screen. Just again, circle up with somebody close to you. And here are those 3 questions. What is the most widely used app in your household? What stage of life are you currently in right now? The more restriction, less responsibility, or the less restriction, more responsibility phase of life? And then what is one idea or resource from tonight that you need to keep using or start using from this night out? So we're going to take about 3-4 minutes and answer these questions together. I know that was a quick turnaround, but we are super excited to be moving into this third section of our night. Tyler's great. I'm all right. But we have 3 people who have agreed to come up and have a panel discussion with us on this topic. So I want to invite Tommy Scott, Jason Beams, and Matt Mowdy up here. We can give them a little round of applause. Woo! Super excited to have you guys here.
Very
with us.
excited.
Any mic, any chair.
Pick a chair, any chair. Very cool. We may go over just a few minutes on our time, so if you do need to head out, we do apologize for going that. But these guys we've got some great questions for them, and so we're excited to hear come with that. So I'll pass it back over to.
So we'll just start down at the end of the line here. Tommy, Scott, you have several kids kind of right in this age range. So I'd love just to hear from you, like, what are some practices that you have set up in your household? How are you actually currently navigating this as a parent?
Well, get a microphone right here.
So I just learned everything tonight. So I'm going to use Covenant Eyes. I'm taking all of their social media away. So for those of you who don't know, we do have, Ashley and I have 4 kids, all the way from 16 down to 9. We have a 16-year-old son who's in 10th grade. We have a 14-year-old daughter who's in 8th grade. We have a 11-year-old son who's in 5th grade and a 9-year-old son who's in 3rd grade. And so we do have kids that those questions that he had up, we're in all of those. More restrictions, less responsibility, moving into more of the less restrictions and more responsibility. But I just wrote down some things. Greg had sent me kind of what the question that he was going to ask, and so it gave me some time to really kind of think. And so I just put some things down. And my biggest piece of this, for me as a dad with 4 kids, especially having 3 boys, has been the heart focus. And in our family, if I to be truthful with everyone, Ashley is kind of the social media technology guru of the house, has a good feel and a hold on that, and that's something that I really confess to this group that I've got to improve on as a father, to clue into more of that and to understand more of that, of where my kids are. But what I do and I've done since my kids were born is, as a parent, I think we cannot forget the power of prayer for our kids. And so the one and the first and the thing that I will continue to do and hope will infiltrate and penetrate their hearts is the fact that I am praying for them on a regular basis. Times where they don't know that I'm praying for them. I have at night gone to their door and put my hand on their door and pray for them. And I pray this specific prayer, especially for my boys, is that God would keep their hearts pure, that he would keep their eyes from seeing things they shouldn't see, and that even if they see things that they shouldn't see, that they would have a heart that would turn from that. And so that's a prayer that I've always that I've had for my sons, and something that I know that I need to be praying more for my daughter as well. That was one of the statistics that came out of the discussion we had a few weeks ago that really kind of floored me and blew me away, was the amount of female involvement in how many, like, college-age girls, I think was the statistic that they threw out. So that's the first and foremost, and I think above all else, the thing that we can do as parents. I also really believe strongly in it takes a village. I've got 4 kids, and I need help. I need help with my kids. I need help, godly help. And so I think one of the biggest things that we've done, Ashley and I've done as parents, is that we've raised them, hopefully, to love the Lord, to love God. And we've shown them that through one of the things that we've done is surrounding ourselves with other godly people and putting them in ministries like FSM and FSK, and we know that that's a big part of their spiritual maturing and growing in their faith, and so that's a big part of what we do. So if we get more practical with what we've done in our house, we do not allow, and this is something that I really want to strongly encourage, we do not allow our kids to go to anybody's house that we don't know for sure that their parents have the same standards that we have for our kids.
That's good.
And I think that is such a big piece of this dealing with pornography. And I'll share just real quickly. So I have a nephew that is in his adulthood now, who my sisters, they were living in Florida, and he was coming home every day. He was coming home and from school, and he was going over to a buddy's house. And this is when I think about this now, this is when he was Beckett's age. He was 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, and he was going over to this friend's house, and this friend had no standard at his house for what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing, and became addicted to pornography as an 8 and 9-year-old little boy. And it really messed his life up. It really messed his life up for a long time. Had to go through years of counseling to deal with the aftermath of that. And so I would say to us as parents, make sure you know when your kids are going over somewhere that those parents are there and that they're active and that they have the same standards for their children that you have for your children. And then one of the things that we do, we talked about we have a rule in our house that phones, all social media access is done at a certain time of the night, and it's different for the little boys than it is for the older kids. But there's a walking out of their room, setting their equipment down at a specific place in our house, and it's done and it's over with, and it's not something that you can continue to just do until odd hours of the night, which they will do if you do not set those parameters. Another thing that we've done that Ashley and I have implemented for our children is we have the rule of no cell phones for our kids until they reach junior high. In junior high, there's there's kind of that need from a school standpoint to have cell phones. And so if you think your child can't go that long without having a cell phone, I would love to talk to you, because I've got 4 kids, and that's how all 4 they've survived not having a cell phone until they got to junior high. So I can assure you that is possible, that they can do that. And then just a couple of other things is having. So I take all my boys, and Ashley takes Margaret Addison, our daughter, but I take all of our boys. We'll go on a trip when they're turned 12 years old. We go on a trip, and it's kind of a purity weekend trip, but it's straightforward conversation, not only about sex and what sex was intended for and all those things that we talked about tonight, but, addressing with my boys specifically this idea, the pervasiveness of pornography, and having those conversations. And again, it is a continuing conversation. In fact, my 16-year-old and I just had to have another conversation about this the other night when we were up, both of us up late at night, and some things came up, and with just him wanting to be on his social media late at night because it was a weekend and he wasn't going to school. And I'm like, no, I'm not restricting that from you just on school nights. I'm restricting that from you because I want you to have that temptation and have that access, not be a temptation really for you as a 16-year-old. And so we had to have more conversations. So it is a continuing conversation. So those are the things that we've done and what we've talked about in our home.
I love that. That's great. Now, Jason, you've been very open with our church here about your personal struggle with this issue with pornography, and I love the redeeming work of God in your life around this. But I would 2 weeks ago, Ted Shimmer talked a lot about shame. Shame is the enemy of actually having these conversations with our kids and with each other. So I would love to talk to you, to talk to us about kind of how did your relationship with Stephanie on the back end of your like addiction, how did that help your recovery from being addicted to pornography?
This is the wonderful story that we get to tell every first week of Re-Engage Marriage Ministry that we do, but the story of Stephanie and I's marriage. I mean, even as a pastor, early days of marriage brought with me into marriage, thought marriage would solve a struggle with pornography. 18 years old, kind of on my own, but to be able to access that and fall into that. And that day and time, it was a lot harder to access, but yet was still a struggle, thinking marriage will solve all of that, and you get into marriage, and it doesn't. And then shame begins to drive you. I mean, I was a pastor. I wanted freedom. I wanted to walk in repentance. I wanted to be there, but the draw just kept pulling me back. And so now we're a few years into marriage, and that comes to light. But before that, there really was this shame that was driving me. I can't confess this. I can't get this before Stephanie. The one person I need help with, I can't even go to because of this sense of brokenness and shame, and just not the conversation that had happened at the level it needed to happen in our home. But once it came to the surface, it was my worst day. It was the day that broke the heart of my wife. The rose-colored glasses were shattered everywhere on the ground of Jason's not the man that I thought he was. Jason's been dishonest with me for years. All of those things, the broken pieces, was the worst day, but it was also the best day. It was the day that, yes, the shame came into light, but now accountability was there. Grace was extended, and that grace wasn't necessarily 100% from day one, like, okay, you're forgiven, let's never talk about it again. No, there was hurt, there was brokenness, there was a heart-wrenching season of our life that took us about a year or so to kind of work through and process and have hard conversations weekly and monthly through that first year. But it became the best day of my life because it became the place that accountability fell into place. It became the day now that we're a strong restrictions family because of the season we've walked through, but it helped us put the hedges of protection in place for our family to walk forward in victory and to be a confessional family. And I would say what would help with shame, first of all, is confession, bringing things into the light, pulls down the strongholds of the enemy. And it's painful, it's difficult, I was forced into that. I didn't come and confess it. It was Stephanie discovered it, and that was even the worst part of it. But once confession brought it into the light, it made our home a more confessional home where we owned our own sin and we owned our brokenness. And so now we're able to have conversations like even just a couple weeks ago with Aubrey. We've been struggling with music. I mean, it hasn't been pornography. It's just been music. Like, if you want to listen to certain songs, come tell us. We'll give you permission after we listen to it and say, okay, that's good music. Put it on your Spotify list. But Aubrey would just kind of hide and not tell us what music she's listening to. And then we discover what it is. And it's not that it's even what songs. It's just the fact that you're being deceptive. And so we were confronting her just a couple weeks ago and saying, Aubrey, just come to us. We're not putting restrictions on you that we don't even put on ourselves. And for me, an age-appropriate confession to Aubrey was, Aubrey, I don't know if you've realized this, but even on my own phone, I don't have internet access. I don't have a search engine on my phone. You know why that is? Because Dad struggled. I struggle with sin. I've had difficulty with it, and I want hedges of protection in place. I want to walk in victory. We want to paint a greater picture for our kids that it's not about restriction. It's not about not having. It's about having the better things. What's the better relationship down the road because you guarded and protected your heart now, and God blessed down the road? What's the bigger picture and the greater picture I can paint for my kid? Not about restrictions, but about this beautiful picture of what God wants to do. But that comes, and that shame-free environment comes because we're willing to confess our own brokenness and our own sinfulness and our own willing to put in restrictions on ourselves to guard and protect our hearts because we want to honor God. And so we put those in place, even for Stephanie and I and for our family, so that the environment that we have in our home is, as best we can, a place where hopefully our kids can confess sin, where they can say, I'm struggling. And when they don't confess that, we can say, hey, you've overstepped the boundaries, and here's the penalties, here's the struggles, here's what's going to happen because you've been dishonest. We want to mold and shape their character where they can be confessional before us and hopefully create that kind of environment. But it's hard. It's hard. Stephanie probably could speak to this 1,000 times better than me because she really is kind of the foundation behind all of that. But that's some things we just implement to try to make our home, as best we can, a place where our kids can confess and they don't necessarily have to feel shame because they're going to sin, they're going to struggle, they're going to mess up, but making it okay to confess and realize that there's a greater story out there. So,
yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think there's also this idea. This is for Matt. There's this idea that like, oh man, our kids are just going to struggle with this for sure. And so we're just going to have to, for sure, create the environments for confession and all of it. Yes, we need to do that. But I was having a conversation with Matt's oldest, with his son, Jake, a couple years ago, and was just saying, hey, man, we were talking about sin struggles, and he was like, man, I haven't struggled with pornography. I've never looked at pornography. He was a 17-year-old kid at the time. And I was blown away by that because it's like, oh, yeah, I did, but now I'm trying to work through it. And so, Matt, I just want to toss this at you, man. What is it that you did? What are the restrictions you had? And what did you guys do in your home to help give Jake that kind of victory when he before he headed out to college?
Well, first off, we do have two children. Jacob is now in college, and he's headed back right now. He's 18 at Arkansas State. And our daughter is 16, just turned 16, just started driving. And so we kind of have two opposites ends of the spectrum. We have the boy and the girl. And so we've definitely treated both of those different because it is definitely not the same. If you say pornography, Megan would just laugh at 16 at us. And so I would say that Jenny and I, we had conversations a long time ago about what we wanted for our kids, and I'll backtrack a little bit, but what we wanted for our kids when we sent them off to college. And these were conversations we had when they were young teens. And one thing we both felt is I grew up in a Southern Baptist church where it was all about the don'ts. And so when I got to college, it was like, man, if I had that checklist, then I was good. And Jenny kind of came from a more of a liberal Methodist background, and any of you have been through, grew up in that background, it's a little different. And so, but we kind of met in college, and our stories, although came from a different perspective, it helped us mesh what we felt like parenting-wise what do we want our kids to, when we send them off to college, what do we want it to look like? And for us, we had that conversation, and ultimately it came down to the heart. And it came down to, if our kids are in the world but not of the world, and how do we play that game? How do we play the bubble game but yet be ready to send them off? And how is Jake going to be ready to be sent off when he's 18? And we failed a lot of times with this, but one thing we've tried to do is know that we didn't put so many boundaries that they just didn't feel like they had any freedom. But we did play the boundary game in a lot of ways. When it came to phones, for instance, we would say at any point in time, anytime we want to, we have access to your phone. You give it to us. We have the password. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so our kids got used to it before Jake would even care about a girl. Here. And then it even got more serious when we got into the Snapchat and all that entails. And Jenny could follow them on Instagram and follow and stay with them on that kind of things. And so she was more of on that side, covering those bases. But one thing we did that I asked Jake the other day if I could talk to you guys about this, because I told him what we were doing tonight. And one thing we started when Jake was really little, we kind of put pornography in the same boat of just adultery and just doing things right. And as you start dating girls and things of that nature, treating them right and doing right by them. And one thing we did, we always put marriage on a pedestal, to where our kids, even when Jake was little and you try to have that first sex talk with him, and he's like, ugh, it's disgusting. And then I would come home to Jenny and I go, I don't think we're quite where we need to be to have that conversation yet. And so we would kind of back it out a few months, and then he would get to the next grade and we would try to, and I could see that he was kind of getting it a little bit. But what we did is, by putting marriage on a pedestal from a young age, we talked about marriage. And we talked about that, how I know you guys don't even think about being married one day, but just know we're praying for your future spouse. And just know mom and dad are praying for those future spouses. And in doing so, by putting that importance on things, then when the conversation started coming up about, hey, Jake, I don't know if you'll date anybody in high school. I don't know if you'll date anybody before the girl you marry one day. But just know that whether or not be pornography, what you're looking at, or who you're dating, that it's super important for you to understand that you're either honoring or dishonoring your future wife, period. You're either honoring her by the way you're treating the girl you're dating right now, or what you're looking at. And so we flipped that with our daughter and said, sis, you've got to honor your husband in a different way, because you don't need to put yourself out there all the time with what you wear. Because yes, y'all are wired differently. And we would talk to Jake and we'd say, Jake, if you're looking at pornography, you have to understand that's somebody's sister or somebody's mom. How would you feel like if your sister was being looked at that way, or your mom was being looked at that way? And how do you feel about knowing that by you doing that you're dishonoring your future wife? And so I kind of finished with this. I asked Jake a few weeks ago, I said, Jake, Tyler told me y'all had a conversation. I didn't even ever know y'all had that conversation. And I said, Jake, what's your struggle like now that you've taken off to college? And he was like, Dad, that's not a struggle for me. And I said, tell me one thing that we've ever done that you felt like we've screwed up a lot, but what have we ever said to you that has affected that in your mind? And he told me, he said, Dad, the number one thing is I just don't want to dishonor my future wife. Wow. And for us, if all the other screw-ups that we've done as parents, and we screwed up and said things that we all regret saying and all those kind of things, but along this line, I would say that we tried to work on the heart, because ultimately he's now in a place where he can do anything he wants to anytime. And he's beginning to set up those parameters for himself and those hedges of protection for himself as he's involved in a church up there, and he's in a D group, and he's in a college ministry. And so hopefully, we probably, as we look tonight, we probably didn't do enough on some of those other things, but we really worked on the heart.
Wow, man, that is so powerful. I so appreciate you guys being honest and what you guys are doing with your family. And I think what we can see, and I know a lot of you guys are doing this already, but we have the opportunity to be intentional with our spiritual influence over our kids. And so we're super thankful for you guys being here. So I'll kick it over to Greg as we close out.
Yeah, I just want to close this out tonight just by saying, so thankful that you guys are here, that you took this night. This is such an important topic, and I would say if there's one closing thought, it's that guard the heart. It's what we've been talking about all night. We can know all the tech stuff, we can know all that stuff, but if we're not guarding the hearts of our kids, equipping them to be who they're going to be as adults, it's all for naught. So I would just leave us with that, and I just want to pray for us as we head out that God would guide, guard, and direct us in this. God, we are just so thankful for moments like this when we can be open and honest about a topic that can be so shameful and so hidden and secret. But God, that we have moments like this to bring it to the light and to, as parents, gather together to learn and be equipped, but to also start to have conversations around this issue that is so pervasive and so harmful and destructive. But God, that we can have victory over through you and through your Spirit. So tonight, God, I just pray that you be with these parents, that you bring to light these struggles that their kids and their students have, that through open conversation and honest conversation, that the strongholds of shame and guilt and anxiety are torn down in their households to where they can openly and honestly talk about their kids and their students' struggle, where they can set good boundaries for their kids, where they can show their kids what it means to follow you when it comes to technology, social media, content, all these things, where they can have conversations about honoring their future spouse through how they interact with technology today. God, we just pray that you would go before us in these conversations with our kids and our students, and you prepare those ways to where when we have those conversations, as we navigate this topic as parents, that we know that you are there, that you've gone before us, and that you are for our kids and students so much more than we could ever know. God, we thank you for this, for these moments and for this night, and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night, and we will be down front. If you have any questions, any follow-up stuff, we'll be down front for as long as we need to be.